Hello and welcome to CEO Insights, the program that interviews chief executive officers and top management from companies here in Vietnam. I'm your host and my name is Leon Shears, and I'm delighted to say that today I have my good friend Ken Atkinson, who is the executive chairman of Grant Thornton Vietnam, one of the leading firms of accountants here in Vietnam. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Leon.
Good to see you. I will start with my regular question, which is, why Vietnam?
Why Vietnam? Good question. Well, it all started back in 1989 when one of my clients that I was working with in mainland China asked me to come to Vietnam to do a feasibility study for them for a project in Hanoi.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with Hanoi, I fell in love with Vietnam, and decided that Vietnam was a much better option than China for my particular business.
Right.
Due to, well, the relative size, much smaller, two major cities, so unlike China where you had to have contacts and good relations almost everywhere, Vietnam for a smaller company was a lot easier to handle.
So you were sort of one-man business then?
I was pretty much a one-man business. Yeah, one man and two dogs.
And then you moved to Ho Chi Minh City?
I moved to Ho Chi Minh City in 1993. At the end of '92, we got our first license in '93.
Right.
After trying for 2.5 years to get a rep office license. Yeah, we were just across the road in the old Eden Centre.
Oh, right. We'll knock that down and put something very spectacular there now.
Yeah.
And you came over as an independent in financial projects. How come move into accountancy, which you're not an accountant, are you?
Well, I am now, but I wasn't then. I'd actually studied accounting and law and decided not to go into the accounting profession. But in 1994 the opportunity came to affiliate with Grant Thornton, and I decided that to have a good brand name would be a real advantage for a small consulting firm, and I'm glad to say that was probably the right decision.
Oh, absolutely. From the success you've enjoyed in the subsequent years. And you didn't decide to go with one of the other big brand names? No, I did explore the possibility of going. I have a strong background in the hotel and hospitality business, and it was actually a feasibility study for a hotel that brought me here. Right.
So I did explore the opportunity, or explored opportunities with one of the other firms that was strong in tourism and hospitality. But in the end, I decided that Grant Thornton was a better proposition.
Yeah. And you've huge reputation now, of course, in hospitality.
Yeah.
Not only with the hotel survey every year, but also your connections with the various sort of advisory boards around the place.
Right. Yeah, I'm currently chairman of the Tourism Advisory Board and chairman of the Tourism Working Group under the Vietnam Business Forum. Right.
And tourism is one of the major contributors, about 10% of GDP?
Directly and indirectly, yeah.
Yeah. And how successful do you think you might be in actually guiding the government in the direction that the various boards think they should go?
I have to say it's a little bit of an uphill struggle. I think the people at the Vietnam National Administration for Tourism actually get what needs to be done, but there's so many stakeholders, particularly when we start to talk about easing the visa restrictions. Mm-hmm. You've got the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you've got Public Security, you've got the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and other stakeholders. So it's quite complex, but the Prime Minister's recently taken more of an interest in what's going on in the tourism and hospitality industry.
Because it is one of the industries that's sort of held up as a success, isn't it? The incoming numbers continue to rise year after year.
Yeah, but I think it could do so much better. There is so much more potential here. And if you look, I always look at Thailand in the mid 80s when they were getting about 6 million foreign visitors a year. Vietnam's currently on 7.8, but Thailand's doing 22 million plus now. So that's the kind of potential that Vietnam has.
Yeah. It seems that overseas investors think there's a great opportunity because we continue to see more and more international hotels being built. So where do you think the problem might lie? Is it a government not kick-starting it, or do you think the people actually involved lower down in the industry, the hotels, the restaurants, the tourist sites, the facilities and amenities are?
I think there's a whole host of issues, but just to pick up on something you said, I mean, a lot of the foreign operated hotels operating under the international brands are actually owned by local investors.
Yes.
And there's a big difference in the time it takes, for example, for a foreign investor to get licenses and get land cleared, and because they want to do things properly, to some of the big local developments. And a great example of that is a project I've been involved with in Phu Quoc, where it's taken us 7 or 8 years to get to a point where we can actually move on to the site. And Bincom within 12 months have actually moved onto a site, put up a 5-star hotel and golf course. Right. So I think foreign investors are at a disadvantage. Foreign investors look to make a financial return on the project. And because the land prices are so high, very often you don't see that. Whereas the Vietnamese investors I think they view land as a store of wealth.
Right. So it's attitudinal thing.
Yeah. So it's like in England when we buy a home, we don't buy a piece of land, we actually buy a house that happens to have a garden.
Yes.
Here people buy the land and happen to put a house on it.
Interesting. So moving on from hospitality. Moving on from hospitality. Going back, if you like, to accountancy in Grant Thornton, what has been the main difficulty in trying to grow the business?
Well, Grant Thornton is well, I don't like to say franchise, but it's like a franchise. It operates in a very similar manner, so we've had to finance the growth of the business ourselves.
Right.
And financial resources and human resources to a certain extent have been the biggest problem we've had in growing the business. So we've had limited financial resources. That means we've been limited in the number of expats we could hire to really help train and develop local staff. But we're at a point today where nearly all our partners are now Vietnamese. So,
well, the Vietnamisation of firms like Grant Thornton is actually a benefit for the country, of course.
Yeah.
As long as the training is there.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because if you look, I forget the number now of foreign invested enterprises in Vietnam, but it's very, very much lower than the number of local enterprises, and therefore the biggest potential market for us is actually Vietnamese companies, and you really need Vietnamese partners to deal with Vietnamese clients.
Yes, you think that's because Vietnamese clients are rather more inward thinking, or it's because their experience is such that they're not quite sure about dealing with an international company?
I think the ones that we deal with, of course, are looking for they're looking to the advantages of working with an international company. But on the other hand, I think sometimes culturally and language-wise, they don't feel that comfortable dealing solely with expats.
Yeah.
A lot of them like to see an expat, but don't necessarily want to be dealing face to face with an expat through the engagement process.
Yeah. So they want it both ways. They want the international experience, but the local experience to make certain that the actual understanding. One of the difficulties, of course, is language.
Yeah.
Even for Vietnamese people who speak good English and foreigners who speak good Vietnamese.
of which I'm
So,
not one.
huh?
Of which I'm not one.
Well, you've only been here, what is it, 25 years,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's not surprising. For a new investor, what would be your main points of watch out for this? And
Well, I think Vietnam's got enormous opportunities in a whole host of sectors, but it's not an easy place to do business. So things that one takes for granted, like setting up a company in Hong Kong or in Singapore that takes 72 hours and costs a couple of $1,000s, it's going to take you a lot longer in Vietnam. You can't get a shelf company, for example. So I always say to people when they're starting a business here, however long you think it's going to take you and however much you think it's going to cost you, double it. And if you come out ahead of that, then that's a bonus. But I think people underestimate the amount of time and the hidden costs of doing business here. Biggest challenges are lack of transparency. Although the licensing process for normal business, if you're not in sectors that are conditional sectors like telecoms and printing and stuff like that, it's a lot more straightforward now than it used to be. They're moving to an online licensing system which cuts out the interaction with officials, which is a good step forward. So, but I think really understanding the culture is that's true everywhere, but I think it's particularly important in Asian countries, where face is really very important, although a lot of people don't really understand that. But I think understanding the culture is very, very important. Particularly Vietnamese, they're very friendly, they're very open, but they are incredibly sensitive, and it's very, very easy to upset people unknowingly. Right.
And of course, well, in my experience, they don't actually say, "I'm upset." They just very quietly just disappear.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of career opportunities, where would you point people in the general direction?
Career opportunities for Vietnamese?
For individuals, yes,
yeah,
Vietnamese people, yeah.
Well, I think there's huge opportunities in the professional services field. I think it's absolutely fantastic that the first, local has been appointed CEO of HSBC. I think that's, fantastic.
Major step forward.
Position to get to, and we can see that happening more and more. I mean, as I say now, all my 12 of our 14 partners are Vietnamese. So tremendous development in that area, younger generations coming through, overseas educations. So it's going to be a very different place in 10 years' time than it is today in that respect. So professional services is a great opportunity, healthcare, education.
The government has a gender equality program on its agenda. Do you think that's making any headway?
I think they've had it. I think they've had a gender equality without having a policy. When you look at the number of women in senior positions in Vietnam, I think it's quite outstanding.
Yes,
although not so much at a government level, but certainly in business.
Yes.
You've only got to look at Vina Milk and Ree and lots of other companies where the CEOs are really dynamic ladies.
Yes. I've always wondered about this gender equality program, because in my experience, like you, women run the place anyway, but perhaps not in officialdom.
No. Well, the males are meant to be the head of the household, but in fact they're not. But that's true everywhere, probably.
Yes, more than likely. More than likely. Is there anything that you would undo over the last 25 years, or do again slightly differently?
Oh, I think as you get older, you learn a lot. And I'm still learning, so I mean, I wouldn't change what I've done, but I might have been a little bit more focused. I might have developed a little bit more of a strategy plan. Right. But in the early days, it was you have to kind of go with the flow a lot. So whatever strategy you try to develop was probably turned upside down within 7 days. So, but I think today, have a strategy, have a focus, and stick to that focus. Don't get sidetracked.
Yeah, well, that's very difficult in an expanding and growing environment.
Yeah.
In terms of Grant Thornton for a minute, it's a regular accountancy firm with the usual sorts of services, audit, tax advisory, etc. Do you see that changing very much over a period of time?
I think the core services will stay the same, but I think we'll see more niche services, particularly in the advisory area, like business risks, enterprise risk management, consulting with banks. So I think the services will become more kind of how can I say more strategic and more sophisticated.
Do you think Vietnamese business is becoming more strategic? One of the criticisms that I hear is that people thinking longer term, it's very difficult for Vietnamese because of their culture and tradition.
Yeah. I think if you look at the really successful Vietnamese entrepreneurs, I think they've certainly had a strategy and stuck to it. They do, I mean, generally there's not people don't plan far ahead here, but I think those successful guys have. And I think more and more Vietnamese are realising the benefits or the advantages of using consultants to help them develop their business, and we see more of that certainly in our business. And I think because of the lack of availability of capital and finance, they're looking more and more to strategic partnerships with foreign investors.
Yes, I think that one of the problems I've found is when you've got a sort of a self-grown business, the chief can rarely see the wood from the trees. You need to stand back, and one way to do that, of course, is using outside resources, consultants, advisors, mentors, coaches, whatever you want to call it.
Or stepping up to the chairman.
Or stepping up to the chairman. Yes. So, after 25 years, that's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's flown by. I can remember arriving down in Ho Chi Minh City from Hanoi and finding the office and moving in there, almost like it was yesterday. A few more grey hairs.
And in the next 5 years, what does that hold in store for Captain Atkinson?
Well, for me personally, I've committed 5 years full time with the firm as chairman, so I'll continue to focus on business development and client relationships and some advisory work. But I think for Vietnam there's going to be a lot of development. I think my prediction is 2016, 17, 18 are going to be boom years for Vietnam. Not in the same level as they were in 2006, 7 and 8, but certainly much better than they have been over the last few years.
2015?
Yeah, a little bit better than 2014, but not hugely, I don't think. And I mean, we're still very uncertain what's happening in the States. Growth is down again. There's question marks being asked. The Eurozone, anything could happen with, Greece. Grexit, so they're now calling it possible Brexit. And growth, even UK, which had 2.9% last year, last quarter was much lower than the previous quarters, so possible faltering of growth there. But the EU free trade agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, if ever it gets signed, should be signed towards the end of this year. That, of course, opens up a lot of opportunities for Vietnam. We're seeing a lot of inward investment because of those free trade agreements. So, I think they're going to be good years.
The start to each year, the start to each year seems quite interesting because you get the positive start because it's January the 1st and we're on a new calendar. But then it takes a hiccup because we have to go through TED. And then
it's our New Year, it's not the Vietnamese New Year.
Well, I fully appreciate that. And then there's TED. So really and truly, sometimes the New Year doesn't start until about March.
No, yeah, it depends when it falls. But this year, certainly, although I have to say, obviously it's a busy audit season, but our advisory practice has been, and tax practice have been very busy.
Well, that's what I've heard. And I was at a presentation yesterday where the last quarter of 2014 was presented as being very optimistic and very positive, and quite a lot of growth compared with 2013.
Yeah.
And that seemed in the presentation to be carrying forward into 2015. So I wondered whether, I think everybody waits for the new year to kick off a new start, but maybe it's going to be this year. But you say 2016.
Well, as I say, I think there'll be some improvements over last year. But I don't think it's going to be really significant. I think significant growth is going to come in 16, 17, 18.
And the election?
Oh. People will change, but nothing will change. Or people will change nominally, I should say. System here is Prime Minister moves on, but he still keeps his office and he still influences all decisions. And the current Prime Minister is destined for one of the other two major positions in government.
So isn't that a good thing, some continuity?
I think political stability is, the biggest concern for foreign investors generally. So political stability is a major plus factor for Vietnam. Yeah. And the fact that, I always compare Vietnam to Hong Kong in lots of ways, that people aren't really that interested in politics. They're more interested in making money and improving their living standards. So,
No, it seems to me that, as I say, continuity is important because you can then forget about it and get on with your daily life.
Yeah.
Which is very important. Right, well, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank
really
you.
Interesting talking to you.
Right, thank you.
And I hope our viewers find it so as well.
Right, thank you.
Thank you for watching this edition of Chief Executive Insights, and I look forward to seeing you at our next viewing. Thank you.